Hey guys, and welcome to the Protoss vs. Zerg introduction video. This is an introduction to the matchup, and really I'm just going to go over as many important details in the matchup that I think are suitable for sort of a quick introduction without going into too much depth on anything. I am, of course, the Truth, and this is Build Order Win. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started with how PvZ often starts out. And that is deciding how to open up in this matchup with your build order. So from this Protoss standpoint, you have a few choices. You can do Nexus first into Forge, Nexus first into Gateway, or you can do Gateway Expand. Those are sort of the three core build orders. Of course, you can also do Forge first for cannon rushing. You can do one base all-in, I guess, or I don't know. There are some other weird variations, but those three are the core ones, I would say. For the Zerg player, typically they're going to do Hatch first into Pool, or Pool into Hatch. They can also do 3 hatcheries before Pool. They can go for a quick gas and spawning Pool. So they have a bunch of options as well, definitely more so than the Protoss player. But, so in this game I go for the Forge. I don't really do this anymore, but regardless. In the early game in this matchup, if you are choosing to just be doing like a standard macro build, there's not really a ton of aggressive moves you can make. And for the Zerg player, the same is not really true. Well, I guess, I don't know, I mean, both sides can do something very aggressive, but really, if you're going to try to make a lot happen, you have to really commit to it in the early stage in this matchup for either side. With that said, even if you want to go for just a really standard macro build and just get 3 bases up safely, it is still pretty important to move across the map and try to force the Zerg player to not just keep making workers and that's like the only thing they're doing. The reason for this is because you just don't want, neither side wants to let the other side just sit back and macro and do what they want. That's one reason why I think it's a very, very difficult matchup. So, anyway, if you are playing standard, I guess we'll go over more about the early game. So the Zerg player can do a bunch of all-ins. I'm going to go into more depth with my later to come scouting information video on this matchup. But really, it all revolves around their third base, and really the same for the Protoss player. But because the third base comes up faster for the Zerg player, the all-ins also usually will come sooner. And so it's very important to scout for a Zerg player's third base. In this game, I think I did scout over here and I didn't see one. That doesn't mean they are going to all-in, but it just means that they're either going to do an all-in, or fast lair, or fast speed. So those are really the 3 core options that they have if they delay their third base. But okay, so going into the mid game, getting a third base up, there's a lot of ways you can go about it as a Protoss player. You can go for it super quickly and just say, I'm going to get my third base before they can really do anything about it. Even if they see it, they have to be going for an aggressive build to punish it, and usually you can scout for that ahead of time as well. So there's that option. There's the option of going for... so there's not really many in-between options. Like, typically in this matchup, you can't really go for something like semi-aggressive into a third base. I guess there are builds for that for sure. I even have one now that I'm thinking about it. But typically it's either you go for a quick third, or you choose one tech option and then take a third base. So in this particular game, I go for a Stargate. That's my tech option. You almost never want to get 2 of these 3 buildings, which are the 3 you see right here. The Robo, the Twilight Council, and the Stargate. Typically, you don't want to make more than 1 before taking a third base, because it's just going to slow down your third base, and if you do make it, then you want to justify it somehow. And usually that's aggressively. So, in this, I believe this matchup is really difficult because it's very important to take control of the flow of the game. You want to force your opponent to play reactionary against you and not have it the other way around where you're having to worry about what is my opponent doing, do I need to worry about mutalisks, the Zerg player doesn't want to be, is the Protoss player going to all-in me, and whatnot. I guess that's the first thing that comes to mind. So in this particular game, well, I guess some common strategies you can do are move across the map early with a Zealot, Mothership Core, and Stalker, something like that. Going for Phoenix forces them to go for Hydralisks and not open with Mutas. That's one way of taking control of the game. Doing anything aggressive, really, is going to force a Zerg player to react to that immediately. They can't continually, like, if they wanted to rush for Ultralisk, they're going to take a lot of damage while trying to get those up. So ideally, they would have to make units to defend, thus delaying any tech transition they want to do. And typically, the tech transition that you're really worried about is Mutalisk. So there's lots of ways to play this matchup out for sure. It's a very dynamic matchup, but it's also very difficult. So I didn't really like how the second half of this video went, so I decided to come back in time and edit it. I did miss a couple things I wanted to talk about and mention with the late game of PvZ. And so to start off, or I guess the general goal of the second part of the video is going to be your goals, no matter what build order you're going for, but what your late game goals are going to be. And as well as what the Zerg player is going to be trying to accomplish before the late game, before the Protoss player. So the Zerg player, let me start over, does not want the Protoss player to have a super death ball that they can't really kill. And then the Protoss player wants to get the super death ball that the Zerg player can't really kill. Those are your two general those are the two general sides of logic for your typical PvZ match. Now, of course, that's not always going to happen, but let's talk about ways to get there or to avoid getting there for both sides. So the Protoss player, we can start with them. When you have a third base up and secured, you're usually in a pretty good spot as a Protoss player. Or not pretty good spot, but you have the tools necessary and you have the income necessary to get to that Death Ball army. And so we're going to look at what you're typically going to want to do from the point of having a third base safe. And so that's going to be adding on a bunch of gateways, adding on High Templar if they go Vipers, adding on Immortals if they go Ultralisk. If they're doing a Muta switch, you can either go kill them if you can react fast enough, or you add on Phoenix and Stargates to defend versus that. And really you're just trying to get a fourth base up, and you're either trying to get to a super death ball and push once you have it, or you are trying to be more aggressive and not allow the Zerg player to do what they want to do. And so let's talk about what the Zerg player's main priorities are in the time between third base is safe and secure. So that's the starting point, and then the end point would be when the Protoss player has their super death ball. So what the Zerg player is going to do is, it depends on what build they're going for. Typically you'll see most Zerg players go for Roach Hydra, and so sometimes they will try to go for a Viper timing, so they'll sort of rush out Vipers a little bit and try to attack you before you have High Templar to feed back the Vipers. And so if you're a Protoss player and you're not prepared for this, or let's say you're behind a bit in the game, this can often kill you. Other options that the Zerg player has is to not go for such a killing blow, but instead to do an earlier attack with Roaches and Hydras, let's say, and just try to trade out their army for your army. They're not really trying to kill you, but if they can trade kind of efficiently, and this will occur when they are approaching a max out, they're going to be happy because they're going to really delay the Protoss in taking a fourth base and getting up to their super mega death ball, and it will buy the Zerg player a lot of time. So those are probably the two core strategies that the Zerg player has. Before it used to be go for swarm hosts and embrace the hour-long game that it will bring. But now if the Zerg player wants to look more into defending and going for their own supreme army composition, usually it will be about taking a fourth base, and going for Broodlord, Infestor, Viper, Queen. That's really the composition that's gonna challenge the Protoss Death Ball the most. Tempests were recently nerfed. Their damage against Broodlords, or massive air units, I should say. So they're not such a hard counter now. So I guess the one option we haven't really talked about, which we're sort of seeing unfolding right now, is that as a Protoss player, you can look to be super turtle-y, take a 4th base, and get your supreme army composition. The risk with this is that if the Zerg player attacks into you with, doesn't really matter what they're attacking into you with, but if they do so, and they trade even at all decently, they can make a big tech switch happen, and before you're able to cross the map and kill them, they'll have 40 Mutalisks up, or they're going to have tons of Ultras to counter your composition. And so that can be the scary thing, while trying to sort of turtle up. The alternative to that as a Protoss player is to do some late game harassment. Charge Lots, Warp Prism, and Recall are your 3 best bets. You don't really need any fancy army composition to accomplish this. You don't need DTs, you don't need, I don't know, I'm not going to go into everything, but you don't need like Mass Void Ray or something. But you're really just trying to pull the Zerg player apart. You're trying to deal damage to their economy, their tech, and you're buying yourself time as well to accrue. You're sort of trading out minerals, you're trading out charge lots, but you're still mining lots of gas. So you are still moving forward towards a super death ball with lots of Archons, High Templar, lots of gas intensive units, obviously, but you're delaying the Zerg player from doing the same. And so that's sort of what you try to accomplish with late game harassment in this matchup. And it's honestly very easy to do so. Primarily because Zerg players do not like to add on lots of static D, which is spines and spores, unless they have to. And if you're good at keeping the tempo up, they usually won't really have a chance to get all of their bases secure. They just won't have the time. Okay, so once again, I'm attacking one side of the map while pushing with my army on the other. Zealots here, Zealots here. If this didn't have tons of spine crawlers, I can bet you there would be Zealots there as well. Killing creep is very important, but I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty details of this matchup. And then yeah, so attacking multiple places at a time is sort of how you make harassment work. I guess I've talked enough about that. But okay, well I think that is going to cover this matchup, just to give you a good basic idea of what you can expect in this matchup. And again, the main goal is to help you understand why the build orders that you'll be seeing on this channel make sense. And then also, I think no matter what build order you do in this matchup, this video should be helpful for you, just to give you a better understanding of what to expect and how to play the matchup as well. So, okay, well that's going to be it for this game and this introduction to Protoss vs. Zerg. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and see you guys next time.